What's going on, everyone? Wesley, Shoemaker, and Keenan Cummings back with another episode of the WVSports.com podcast. The Mountaineers, it looked kind of bleak there in the fourth quarter, but just like the skies were bleak, it was looking bleak for West Virginia. However, the skies turned sunny and things turned sunny as well for the football team in Morgantown. Mountaineers came back, scoring 15 unanswered points late on their way to beating Kansas 32-28, getting a win that they just had to have, getting a win that helps them kind of reset heading into the bye week before what is obviously a challenging month of October. So, Keenan, we had another 2-hour weather delay. We had another
Fun.
afternoon of fun up there in Morgantown. But just your overall thoughts and takeaways on the big win for West Virginia to open Big 12 play.
I mean, it just goes to show where this football team is at this point to me. I mean, a week before, you blow a 10-point lead with 4:55 left, and everybody is just down, gloom, doom. Neil kept talking about everybody getting beat up, in terms of from the media, fans, all that. A week later, you rally from 11 down with 5:39 left in improbable fashion to win a football game. I don't know if the fan base is going to be able to sustain this over the course of the season. I think they would appreciate not blowing or having to rally in the final 5 minutes. But, for West Virginia, in all seriousness aside, that's a win that I don't want to call it season changing because we're 4 games into the season. But you lose that football game, go to 1-3, go into a bye. They looked really bad at times, especially coming out of that break. That first drive in the second half, when after the break was just really bad, and you punt the ball away. Kansas takes it, scores. So I think that from a just holistic perspective, this is a massive win for West Virginia. And I know Kansas is 1-3 now, and it's your first Big 12 game, but you needed something good to happen after what didn't happen in Pittsburgh. And it's up to this team. It's up to Neil Brown. It's up to the coaching staff to kind of make this, is this going to be a junction point of the season? Is this going to be, when this team starts playing more consistent football? Is this going to be, a game they came back and won and we all forget about it because they just can't capitalize on it? I think that's the question this week. What does this win mean for the season moving forward and for the expectations? Because that was – I didn't look at the win probability, but I'm sure it was quite low, when West Virginia gets the football back with 5 minutes, 39 seconds left. And they did the reverse. I think both of us were sitting in the press box, said this multiple times. This offense just looks better when Garrett is just getting the football out, running around, making plays. And that 2-minute style offense, he threw. I mean, this isn't anything new. He did this last year. He thrives in those situations. When he can use his feet, pick up yards. So all that was good. And really, I mean, it sure beats this week being able to talk about West Virginia rallying as opposed to collapsing.
Yeah, I think both of us obviously said this a bunch last week, that this was a hinge point for this team this year. If they go to 1-3, there's a lot of negativity that then enters that building, that then enters the minds of these players that they then have to sit on for not 1 but 2 weeks. And then you head into Stillwater, and that's a house of horrors, it feels like, for West Virginia football. And so it's like then you're just really trying to look down the schedule of where can you get wins. And it just didn't look great if you lose that game. But I think, this is a big win for West Virginia. It's a big win from a morale standpoint, first and foremost, but also it's a big win to show that you can win these types of games against these types of teams. Because if you look at it, there's going to be a lot of these things. The Big 12 is crazy. I'm not sure if you got to see any of the scores from even the later games yesterday, but like Colorado Baylor, that game was crazy. BYU, they beat up on Kansas State. So there's a lot of these teams here that are a lot closer to the middle than they are to the top or bottom. And so I think that's where West Virginia is in this league. And so going forward, you have to prove that you can win these types of one-score games. You have to prove that you can come back at times. And, Garrett, he's at his best when he's moving, and it's a kind of a good kind of chaos is what I kind of term it there. But it's there were times yesterday where you were right. It was ugly. The defense to open the third quarter, it was like, oh, here we go again. They were just, after they played pretty well throughout the first half, they got the interception from Tyron Bradley. TJ Jackson had a couple of big plays on the defensive line. Like, they were able to hold Kansas in check. I don't think either of us thought they would only hold them to 7 points in the first half, and that was a good surprise. And I think then when they open the third quarter and Kansas kind of just marches down the field, boom, boom, and they have 100, I think it was 150 yards of total offense on their first 2 drives after having 160 yards of total offense in the entire first half, you're like, hold on, let's pump the brakes. But then they got a couple 3-and-outs. They got the stop that they needed there late, right? And maybe some of that had to do with a little bit of play calling and that playing into what West Virginia wanted Kansas to do of running the ball. And maybe they could have done a couple things better schematically if you're KU, but they didn't. And that's neither here nor there at this point because West Virginia made the plays that needed to happen when they needed to make them. And then Garrett Green. Yeah, it looked crazy at times with him running zigzag across the field and just running with his hair on fire, which what we are used to when he is at his best, but he made plays when it had to happen. Rodney Gallagher stepped up. Hudson Clement, big day. And so I just think overall it was like you had to have guys make plays. And this time last week, that's what we said didn't happen for West Virginia, but this time this week, it did. They made plays.
Yeah, and I want to give the defense some props here. You know, they were destroyed by pretty much everybody.
Us included.
You know, yeah, I was critical of the defense as well. I want to be very clear here. Was it perfect? No. Was it much better? Yes. And, you know, they had to do a lot of different things. You know, they said they were going to make changes. They did. You know, Jordan Leslie moved to the box. Trey Bell came down. Injuries kind of forced them to play a different style of defense, a 4-2-5. And they had to play some nickel with Aiden Garnes because of what happened to Aubrey Burks and,
which
you know,
sucks, by the way.
TJ Crandall. Yes. But, you know, they tried new personnel. You know, they started 2 different corners. So you can say a lot of different things about the way the defense has performed so far this year, but they kept things in front of them. They limited big plays. Kansas had 3 passing plays over 15 yards. And I know, you know, some of that West Virginia's playing coverage, you know, that they want Kansas to run the football, but outside of a few reverses that they had in those games, it kind of got West Virginia going a different way. They did a pretty good job on their run game too. They got them with the option a few times and some of those reverses, but I thought it was a much better performance. Strangely enough, like they didn't tackle as well as they've been tackling. I think when I looked last night, they had 13 missed tackles in the game, which they only had 17 in the 3 games before that. But just watching the product on the field, guys were there. They missed tackles, but they were there, which is you'll take over the alternative any day of the week. And I think that they deserve some credit. You know, Shadon Brown, the secondary played better. Now, I think Jalen Daniels still had some throws that he could have hit, but I think that those guys did a really good job and they deserve credit because, as Neil said, that, you know, they took some punches this week. I wrote some things about them. I'm sure everyone on the beat wrote some things about them, and deservedly so. You know, you lose a game like that on defense, you deserve criticism, and that comes with the job. That comes the nature of the job, and when things go well, you deserve some praise. So I do want to make that clear that you see signs. Is this unit turned around? No. But you see signs of what it could be. I don't think you're going to be able to play that way against everybody, but it's good to see some different faces out there trying some different things and really getting some results because 2 biggest plays in this game, you know, everyone's going to point to the Rodney Gallagher touchdown. Yes, that was huge. But the biggest play of that game to me is the strip sack. You know, I think that and that's number 1. Number 2 is the 3rd down play on Kansas's last drive. If they don't make that play, Rodney Gallagher doesn't happen. Correct. So I think that for them to get off the field in that situation when they had to get off the field and then to strip sack, it's the defense slamming the door on Kansas, which is exactly what the opposite occurred against Pitt. So I think that's encouraging, you know, heading into the bye week, some things to build on.
Yeah, I think as far as the defense goes, you said it like great. Like they got beat up on by everyone last week, and everyone was pointing fingers. Everyone was saying stuff has to change, but then they did change. And I think that's where you kind of have to applaud this coaching staff to an extent of like, it's not like they just tried to trot out the same thing that didn't work because that would have been crazy. And so the fact that they were willing to change, willing to try new guys, willing to move around coaching positions and things like that. Like, you just don't see that with every single staff in the country. And while it may be more of the norm because they had to change because of how things did play out, you're right. Like, when the defense had to make plays, they made plays. Tyron Bradley, man, like, there was probably a lot of Mountaineer fans in that stadium yesterday that when Kansas got that 35, 36-yard pass in the fourth quarter on their last drive, they were like, oh no, they're going to get this, aren't they? But then sure enough, boom, one play later, Tyron Bradley comes steaming off the edge and just makes a play. And so I think that's the big thing too of we were also begging this defense to get some turnovers. And Tyron Bradley got 2 of them. It's weird to say that Tyron Bradley, out of all people, has your last 2 interceptions dating back to the bowl game last year. But that's just what you have to do. You have to have guys step up. And one thing I saw is that the older guys on this team really stepped up. Garrett Green stepped up when it mattered. Tyron Bradley stepped up when it mattered. And so this leadership of this team is going to kind of have to keep this team on the tracks. There's going to be a lot of situations this year where you have opportunities to win games or lose games. And it's those older guys on the team that will either step up or won't, that will kind of probably determine how good this team really can be in those situations.
And I think that leads us into a natural question here. What does this win mean? Are things okay now? Because West Virginia, is it fixed? What does this win mean for this West Virginia team? In the grand scale of things, does it mean anything? Are you concerned that West Virginia had to rally to beat Kansas at home? Are you excited about what's next? I think that's the natural question for me, because we're sitting here last week and it's a lot of concern, and rightfully so. I mean, you have a game, but now you're on the other side of that. Does this propel West Virginia? Does this make West Virginia more of a contender in the Big 12 to you? Does it do nothing for you? And I think that I asked that question on the Blue Lot this week and really was interested in what people were thinking, just based off, there was a lot of frustration. A lot of people were upset with how this season had started. I think you can see there's more of a buzz, around the program right now, obviously, after a win like that. But what do you think, Wes? I mean, do you think is this the start of something, or is this kind of just a footnote in a season?
I think it's hard to kind of say one or the other, truthfully. I think personally, I feel like it could be the start of something just because we know the pieces are there. And so because we know the pieces are there, it's just a matter of, can they piece it together? Can they complete this puzzle that they were still trying to get the pieces out of the box, it felt like, for the first 3 weeks. But like yesterday, they were trying to, when you like get a corner and then another corner, and then you're like, all right, we kind of got something here. So obviously, I think they got a couple corners on this puzzle. And so it's, how do you complete it? And I do think that's kind of a big thing for this week, especially on this bye week, because you really have a great opportunity if you're West Virginia to kind of have that reset, to kind of see and compare what happened against Kansas versus what happened the first 3 weeks of the season, especially in Pitt and Penn State, and what is the difference there. And so I think there's not a lot of times where you can have a direct comparison of good versus bad and really have time to crunch it during the season, just because of the week-to-week nature of a football season. But you now have that opportunity in a bye week. You have the opportunity to get healthy, which there were bodies going down left and right yesterday all over the field. Obviously, the most serious one was Aubrey Burks, who went out on a stretcher but came back, and all good news there. But there were a lot of bodies going down, and you played a physical Penn State team. You played a Pitt team that was a just fight. Like that was a battle. And so then you played a Kansas team where they were pretty physical at the line of scrimmage as well. And so you've got to just kind of reset. I think you could kind of view the season right now into like 3 chunks of 4. You finished your first chunk of 4, 2-2. But this chunk of 4 is probably more important than the first chunk of 4, because you get 4 Big 12 games. You get 2 at your place, 1 on the road at Stillwater, 1 on the road at Arizona. So it's like, I think it can be a turning point, but I think it's kind of too early to tell, because the big thing for me is that they are going to have to use this bye week to their advantage. They are going to have to schematically change a little bit on defense, I think, because it wasn't working to start the year. It just wasn't. And then you see these changes. they've got to continue them. They've got to progress. The offense has to continue to find out what's good, because I know you and I looked at each other a couple times yesterday with play calls that were just confusing. I think there was a 3rd and 5 where they just ran – like, you've got to figure out what Garrett is going to be best at, because truthfully, he's been up and down through the first 4 games. There's been a lot of good. There's been a lot of not so good. And so while that might come with him because of just the type of player and what he's good at versus what he isn't, but you've just got to find out how to be more consistent. And if you can do that, then I think this team can really use this game as a launching point. But if you cannot create consistency from this, I'm not sure you really springboard much going into the month of October.
You hit on kind of what I was getting at. Consistency is the biggest issue with this football team. You never know what you're getting at this point, and that's a problem. But in a way, it's whatever works, right? I mean, I think that the rallying cry this week was go 1-0 in the Big 12. And credit to Neil and his staff. He was able to get his team to rally around that point and pull out a win at home that they desperately needed. Now it's going to be get to 2-0, get to 3-0. And I know it sounds insane to think about, but, if that mantra works, they're able to follow that path. This team's playing in Dallas if you go 9-0. I mean, and I know that that's a far way off, and in no way am I predicting that. But we all know that this team has talent. It's a veteran experience, and it's a talented team. They've not played like it through 4 weeks, but we've seen Neil Brown teams turn around before. Yes, you can argue competition, but we've seen it before. So I'm interested to see, how this team responds. The bye week's going to be huge. You got to get healthy. Aubrey Burks, TJ Crandall, all these guys that went down with injuries, you want to see them back on the field because this team really needs it. They're not playing a lot of guys on either side of the ball right now, which always thins out when you get to conference play. I'm a little surprised, outside of DB, that you're not seeing more. Johnny Williams played 3 snaps yesterday, and that's it. It was the other 5, the starting 5 offensive linemen.
It was only by necessity because Milam had to go out for a couple snaps.
You played 2 running backs. You played a handful of wide receivers, 2 tight ends. So they're not playing a lot of guys. And same thing on defense, playing 5 or 6 defensive linemen, a couple linebackers. So they're not moving guys around. Some of that's injury. Some of that is that's who they trust. So I'm interested to see moving forward, what is this team? Can we figure this team out? Because through 4 games, I have no idea. We were having a discussion on the Blue Light a little bit earlier this morning about expectations, and I think people confused what I was saying. In no way am I saying you have to change your preseason expectations, but good luck trying to figure out which games West Virginia is going to win or lose from now, if they play like they have already, from now till the end of the season, because I can't do it. I don't know what team.
You just don't know what team's going to show up, and I think that's the kind of most troubling thing.
That's a problem,
for fans, because they want a consistent product. While some of these comeback wins might be fun, it's more fun if you can have a consistent team that shows up every single week. And so that's where I think this whole bye week can help them. Is you've got to find what you're best at and figure out how to implement that. And if you can do that as a coaching staff, and you can kind of get that to the players and have this common theme of what you're going to do on offense and what you're going to do on defense, then I think the month of October could be a pretty good month for the Mountaineers.
And I do think that this is interesting too. Had I told you before that game that C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White would have 12 combined carries, and only one of those would go further than 10 yards, would you have believed West Virginia could have won this football game?
I really don't think so.
I don't either. And that I like the fact that you're seeing them adapt in some ways and do some things that to win football games. I think offensively, West Virginia looked good at times. Even on, Garrett had a pick in that game that really the play was there. Traylon Ray's wide open down the field, and he got hit. Yeah. He got hit when he threw it. But still, turnovers are an issue so far for Garrett. He's got 4 interceptions already. He had 4 interceptions all of last season. Yep. So I think that, whether they're tip balls, guys dropping them, getting hit, it doesn't matter. It all counts in the stat book. So you got to take care of the football. They turned the ball over twice yesterday. So I think it's about correcting some of those mistakes and moving forward and continuing to adjust, because this is a veteran team and they can do some different things that you maybe couldn't do with a team that had a new quarterback or a new offensive line. So I am not pessimistic on where this West Virginia football team can go. The next 4 games will be the story of the season to me. You hit on it earlier. You get 2 of those at home. You got to go out to Arizona. You got to go to Oklahoma State. You find a way to win 3 or 4 of those, or even split. You go into the back half with feeling all right. Eight is within reach if you can at least split. Which
also, like if you get split, then you have 2 Big 12 losses heading into the final month of the season. And if you can somehow run the table in November, you're probably playing in Dallas, right? So it's not the craziest thing to kind of get in your imagination. And by no means are any of us predicting that right now, but like you had to win this game because of that. Because
they need to believe that, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
that 100%.
That's what West Virginia needs to believe that, and they need to say those things, because if they don't believe it, they have no shot. And I think that's why you're hearing that over and over and over. Go 1-0. We can get to Dallas. You need to say those things. I mean, I don't want to say we've been critical, but we've pointed out that was something the team said all offseason. You want your team to say those things.
But they also said it, but in fairness too, they also said it right after Pitt. It's not like the messaging changed just because they ran into a couple of losses in the non-conference play. And so I think this goes back to the overarching conversation that we've probably had off air, like on Twitter, like everywhere, of would you rather beat your rivals or would you rather possibly have a chance to contend in the league? And so that's a loaded question. Might ask you. Yeah. Come on.
No, but I know
we know that's not true. But yeah, you get what I'm saying of you lose to Pitt and Penn State, but what happens if you can go have some fun in the month of October and then possibly propel that into a run here in November?
And I think some of that stuff is just people get caught up in the moment. I remember a few years ago, there were people on the message board that said, if they beat Virginia Tech, I don't care what else happens this season. Patently false. People definitely cared about the Big 12 game. So I think you have a chance to rewrite kind of the narrative here of this season. And this doesn't happen without what unfolded against Kansas. It has no chance to happen without what unfolded against Kansas. So I do think that we're moving in a direction where you can see, what's going to happen and feel a little bit more confident if you're a fan. But still, it's the inconsistency that's got to improve. This team's got to be playing more consistent football with as many people that they have on the roster that have played a lot of snaps. So that's my concern. It's my concern that I cover the team and I really don't know what's going to happen from week to week. I don't look at the schedule and say, well, they're playing Kansas, that's a win. No, I don't know. I don't know about I legitimately don't think there's a game on the schedule where I just have chalked down as a loss or chalked down as a win. And now it doesn't matter what I do anyways. Obviously, what's going to play out on the field will decide that. But you feel like, when you're a beat writer, sometimes you have a pretty good idea. Right now, I don't. And, that's a kind of a testament to how they've played so far.
It's also, though, a testament to the league because there is no Oklahoma or Texas anymore. There is no one of those top dogs that you have to play. There's a lot of good teams. There's a lot of pretty good teams. There are a lot of okay teams. And so that kind of middle range is a big deal because you want to be competitive with the current state of college football and how the playoff system works. Like you want to have a shot to win your conference because that guarantees you a spot. And so all West Virginia can do right now is go 1-0. And I know kind of off topic, the Nationals, when they won the World Series, all they said, they were like the last team in the league in May. And then they say, let's go 1-0 every day. Sure enough, they won a World Series. I'm not saying this team's going to make the playoff. Let's get that clear. But what I am saying is that things like that do work for these types of things. You can kind of have that mantra of let's just try and
start somewhere.
And you had to start somewhere, and you started with Kansas. And I think that's the biggest kind of overarching thing is let's just compare Kansas and West Virginia right now. Both teams were 1-2 yesterday, trying to get a win and trying to kind of reverse whatever happened in the first 3 weeks of the season. Kansas is doing a little bit of soul searching today. They were 1-3, and West Virginia easily could have been in their shoes right now. And so it's just that's the margins are so small right now. And so
truthfully though, just think about how different, for better or worse, because we talk about it. Results matter more than anything else. Doesn't matter about how you get there, what you get there. It's the results. How different are things right now if West Virginia just gets one stop against Pitt and they're 3-1?
Yeah.
I mean, you chalk that Penn State game up to just a poor performance. You're 3-1 heading into a bye week. How different are things? And that speaks to what you're talking about. The margin for error is so small, and can completely change expectations.
Yeah, but the coolest thing for them is that they still have the opportunity to prove whatever they want to prove because they've still got 8 games left on the schedule. They've still got 8 more opportunities in Big 12 play to go get a win and then see where that takes them because we know the talent's there. And when the talent is playing well, this team can be pretty good. But it's a matter of trying to find how they can play well for 60 minutes, not just 30, 40.
Or 5.
Correct. Or 5.
12 is wide open, though. I mean, I was watching some games yesterday after the
yeah.
I don't see any team. Utah, I think, is the best team in the league.
But if Cam Rising's still hurt,
even them, I'm not necessarily sold as much because Oklahoma State, even in blowout wins, has not been that great offensively. Yeah. So I think that it's open. Look at what happened to Kansas State last night.
I mean, look at what happened to the Baylor. Let's talk about Houston Hail Mary from last year, man.
Baylor was worse.
Baylor, that was tough. If you're up and then just flicks the ball down the field, boom, 50-yard touchdown, and then you fumble through the end zone.
Fumble going into the end zone. Yikes. Yeah. Condolences, Baylor. You've had some rough ones the last couple of years.
Yeah, let's just stay in our little Eastern time zone section of this and let everyone have the crazy chaos of the Big 12. But you got anything else? Or we getting out of here on this Sunday?
Yeah, I think that the next week will be really important. We've mentioned that. West Virginia's got to get things turned around. I think that they will do that. I think that they should be relatively healthy, and then roll the dice. You go into Gundy land and see if
you're playing with house money there. I mean, you're going to be the underdog against a top 20 team in the country.
I think that it's not the worst matchup for West Virginia on paper. So we'll get into it more. We'll have plenty of coverage this week. We'll have Neil tomorrow. So we'll have all of his comments, all of his reaction, but we welcome you to stay along with us. Have a Q&A podcast this week as well, so get your questions in on the board. I am going to have Wes open that thread right after we get off here and kind of get your questions going and what you want to hear about. So thank you for tuning in, guys.
Yep, thank you for listening. We do appreciate it. Keep it locked on our website, on all of our social media channels, and if you made it this far, we do appreciate you listening. This is the WVSports.com podcast.